The cold metal floor of the arena stung Joran's bare feet. His hands were tied behind his back with thick energy cuffs. His face was bruised. Dried blood painted a trail down his cheek. He stood in the center of a huge alien stadium, surrounded by thousands of loud, cheering aliens. Joran didn't look up. He didn't need to. He already knew what was happening. High above him, in a royal viewing box made of glowing crystal, the alien princess stood tall. Her name was Vexa. She wore golden armor, polished so bright it hurt to look at. Her skin was a deep violet, her long silver hair tied in braids. She had never lost a fight in the arena, and she was smiling. "He's just a slave," she said loudly, her voice echoing across the stadium. The crowd laughed and roared. "This human will beg before I'm done with him." But Joran said nothing. He didn't blink. He didn't move. "Look at him," Vexa shouted again. "Weak, broken, worthless." She jumped down from her platform and landed with a heavy thud in the arena, only meters away from him. "You're not a warrior, you're a toy." The crowd screamed with excitement. Still, Joran didn't answer. Somewhere in the stands, an old alien merchant leaned toward his son. "That one," he whispered, pointing at Joran. "He's not like the others. Look at his eyes." Joran's eyes weren't angry. They weren't scared. They were calm, like a soldier who had seen war and survived, like a storm waiting to break. The gong sounded. It was time to fight. A robotic guard walked up to Joran and pressed a button. The energy, cuffs around his wrists, disappeared. He slowly brought his arms forward, rolling his shoulders. He still didn't speak. He didn't need to. Vexa walked in a circle around him, her golden spear spinning in her hand. "This will be fun," she said. "I'll give the people a good show." Joran looked at her finally. Just one glance. Something in that look made her stop moving for a second. Just a second. But the crowd didn't notice. Only Vexa felt it. The fight began. She rushed forward, fast and fierce like a firestorm. Her spear came down toward his chest. Joran dodged with perfect timing, just a step to the side. She spun and attacked again, but he ducked. No attack landed. Vexa. "Round. You're lucky," she said, annoyed. Joran didn't reply. The crowd had gone quiet. No one expected this. A slave who could survive the princess's attacks? He stepped back, still watching her every move, every breath, every muscle twitch. He had studied warriors like her before. Years ago. Before the chains. Before the pain. Suddenly, she tried a different attack, low and fast. Her spear swept toward his legs. This time, Joran caught the end of her weapon. Gasps echoed through the stadium. Vexa yanked the spear back, but it didn't move. Joran tightened his grip. Slowly, carefully, he let go. Vexa stepped back, now breathing, harder. "You don't speak?" she said. "Scared to show your voice?" Joran looked her straight in the eye. "No," he said softly. "Just one word." But it struck like thunder. The silence that followed was heavy. Then Vexa growled. "You dare!" She charged again, full power now. Her spear aimed for his heart. Joran moved, his foot twisted. His body turned, and her spear missed. He struck her wrist fast and sharp. Her weapon fell. She gasped, stepping back, holding her arm. Joran didn't chase her. He stood still, breathing slow. The crowd went wild. This wasn't just a fight. This was a message. The slave wasn't weak. The slave wasn't broken. The slave had just disarmed the undefeated warrior princess. But Joran didn't smile. He didn't raise his fists. He only stared at her, because this fight wasn't about winning the crowd. This fight was personal. He didn't want their cheers. He wanted them to remember. And the arena was finally listening. The air was thick with tension. Princess Vexa stood frozen for a moment, staring at her empty hand. Her golden spear lay on the ground between her and the human, no longer her weapon, but a memory of her mistake. Joran, the silent human slave, hadn't moved. His eyes were sharp, watching her every breath. He stood calm, hands open, legs ready. He looked like a statue, but one made of fire inside. The crowd didn't know whether to cheer or gasp. Many had never seen Vexa lose her weapon. Not once. Not ever. She gritted her teeth. Her pride burned hotter than her blood. She picked up her spear with her left hand, now awkward, unfamiliar, but she didn't care. "I underestimated you," she hissed. "It won't happen again." Joran didn't reply. Then, she charged. This time she used speed. She didn't aim to kill, she aimed to humiliate. Her spear came low, then high, then twisted around fast. Blades flashed like lightning, but Joran was ready. He didn't block her attacks with strength. He avoided them with skill. His body moved like water, soft, flowing, but dangerous if touched wrong. He let her fury pass by him like wind through trees. Then, his hand struck. It was one fast hit to her shoulder, not with full power, but with purpose. The armor cracked. The audience screamed, not in laughter now, but in awe. Vexa stepped back, breathing hard. She couldn't understand it. No one had ever touched her like that in combat. No one had ever read her moves like this. "How?" she growled. She lunged again, desperate now. Her spear swept low. She twisted her body to fake a left attack, then spun to the right. But Joran was already there. He stepped inside her range and delivered a hard elbow to her ribs. She fell to one knee. The crowd went silent. Blood trickled. From the corner of her lip, Joran stood over her, eyes cold but calm. Still, he didn't finish her. He took 3 steps back and stood tall. The alien nobles in the royal stands looked at each other, confused. This wasn't normal. This wasn't just a fight. Something else was happening. From the shadows, an old alien general leaned against the pillar and whispered to himself, "That human, he fights like an old master." Vexa stood up again, slower now. She wiped the blood from her lip and stared at Joran. For the first time, her eyes held something different. Not just anger, but fear. You know our styles," she whispered. Joran said nothing, but the look in his eyes said everything. He had trained against her kind before. He had fought this exact fighting style in another life, long before he was put in chains. "You're not a slave," she whispered again, her voice shaking. "Who are you?" For a moment it felt like the fight had paused. Joran looked up toward the royal box where the Empress sat, hidden behind shadows and glass. She was watching. He knew she was, and she remembered him. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze back to Vexa. "I'm the ghost your empire buried," he said quietly. Then he moved again. This time his strikes were fast, no more dodging. He attacked with purpose, a kick to the thigh, a hit to the side of her neck, a sweep of the leg. Vexa hit the ground hard. Before she could rise, Joran placed his foot on her spear and broke it in half. The crowd gasped again. Louder. Now. The image was clear. The princess, shining, proud, undefeatable, was on the ground, and the slave, quiet, patient, deadly, was standing tall above her. But he didn't finish her. He stepped back again, hands open, silent. Because this wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was a message. To her, to the crowd, and to the empire that thought a human could be broken forever. Blood dripped slowly from the corner of her mouth. Princess Vexa sat on the dusty arena floor, her hands shaking, eyes wide. For the first time in her life, she felt something sharp crawl into her chest. It was not pain. It was doubt. Across from her, the human, Joran, stood like a shadow carved from stone. His chest moved calmly with each breath. His eyes, cold and deep, stayed fixed on her, not with pride, not with anger, but with memory. The crowd above didn't cheer. They didn't mock. The noise had turned to whispers. All around the arena, nobles and soldiers were now watching in silence. They were unsure what they were witnessing. This was no longer just a show. This was history being written. Vexa clenched her teeth and stood up. Her legs were sore. Her arms trembled. She had never been pushed like this before. She had never been hit like this before. She had never bled in front of her people. "You think this makes you strong?" she barked. Her voice tried to sound confident, but it cracked. "You are still beneath me. You are still—" Nothing. Joran said nothing. He simply walked forward, slow and calm. Vexa gripped the broken half of her spear. Her pride burned hotter than the blood in her veins. She dashed forward, faster than before, spinning with fury, swinging the sharp half-spear like a knife. And for a moment, she was fast enough. Her weapon slashed across Joran's cheek, leaving a red line just below his eye. The crowd gasped, but Joran didn't flinch. Instead, he moved forward even faster, one quick step, one silent spin, and then, crack. His hand landed, clean across her face just below her right eye. His palm hit so perfectly, so sharply that a burst of purple blood sprayed into the air. Her body spun and she dropped to one knee, gasping. A deep red scar opened across her cheek. She touched it, blinking in shock. Her fingers shook as she saw the blood. Not a scratch, a scar. One that would never fully fade. One that would mark her forever. She looked up at him. Her voice didn't come. Her words were lost. That one blow had changed everything. It was not just physical pain. It was her pride. Her title. Her illusion of perfection shattered before thousands. In the royal stands, alien leaders leaned forward. An old noble whispered, "He scarred a royal with one strike." A young alien child in the front row looked at Joran and whispered, "Is he a king?" Joran didn't react. He didn't raise his hands, he didn't celebrate, he simply stepped back again, like always. Vexa's heart pounded in her chest. You could have killed me," she said quietly. Still, on one knee, Joran gave his first long answer. "I don't want to kill you," he said. "I want you to remember me." Vexa's eyes narrowed. "Remember you? I don't even know your name." Joran took one step closer. "I trained your father," he said calmly. The words struck harder than any punch. Vexa froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. "My father died in war," she whispered. Joran nodded. "And I was beside him in the final battle. I carried him when the bombs fell. I burned when he burned, and, when he died, I was sold by the same empire he died to protect." Silence fell across the arena. Now, it wasn't just a fight, it was a truth being revealed. The crowd didn't cheer. They didn't laugh. They listened. Vexa lowered her weapon. Not because she surrendered, but because for the first time, she felt like she didn't understand anything anymore. Joran turned away and walked to the edge of the arena. He looked up at the stars through the open dome. "Your father called me brother," he said. Then he turned back. "But you called me slave." And now she wore a scar to remind her of that forever. The arena was silent, but the storm had already begun. Not outside. Inside her. Princess Vexa stood alone, one hand still on the scar across her face. She didn't feel the pain anymore. She felt something worse. Confusion. Who was this man? Why did he fight like a royal? Why did he speak her father's name with such weight? Across the arena, Joran stood near the edge of the circular battlefield, facing the stars above. They blinked through the open dome like distant memories, some warm, some full of fire. His shoulders were straight, his posture still strong, even after all the hits and blood, he remembered everything. But Vexa, she was just beginning to learn. "You said, you trained my father," she said, her voice quieter than before. Joran turned slowly to face her again. "Yes, before the war, before the Empire sent humans into the dirt." Vexa shook her head. "That's not possible. My father, he only trained with champions." Joran stepped closer. "I was the human champion." he said. Another silence fell. But this time it was heavy with history. He looked down at his own hands, old scars across the knuckles. I came here to teach, to share peace. But when humans refused to kneel, your empire took our leaders, broke their bodies, and turned them into slaves. He looked up again. I watched my friends die in cages. I was forced to fight for sport. And each time I won, they punished me harder so I'd stop winning. Vexa's chest rose and fell with uneven breaths. She remembered stories from her childhood. Stories of a strange warrior, a human with eyes like fire. Her father respected him, even feared him. But those stories were called myths, lessons to scare, spoiled princes, yet here he was. Real. Standing in front of her, not as a ghost, but as a slave. She took a shaky step forward. Why didn't you fight back all those years? I did, Joran said, but quietly. He pointed to the stands. I taught the young guards mercy in the training pits. I helped injured slaves in secret. I taught others to survive. That was my rebellion. Vexa's face grew tight. And now? Now, Joran said softly. I remind the Empire that humans are not broken. The words hit harder than any weapon. Above them, the Empress watched silently. She had said nothing since the battle began, but her fingers were tight around her throne's arms. Her eyes, sharp and golden, watched her daughter carefully. Vexa wiped her lip again. Her blood had dried, but the scar burned. She looked around the arena. The same nobles who once cheered her name now looked uncertain. The same soldiers who praised her power now whispered Joran's name. She could feel the balance shifting. I was told humans were animals, she said. That lie kept you comfortable, Joran replied, until I stood. For a moment, the old pride returned to her face. You speak of honor, but you still wear slave markings on your back. Joran turned slowly. He lifted the torn fabric of his tunic. Across his back were burns, some fresh, some old, symbols of punishment, of silence. But they had faded into thick scars now. He looked over his shoulder. I wear them to remember, he said, because pain makes memory strong. Vexa stepped back, unsure. Joran dropped the cloth and faced her fully. This was never about me versus you, he said. This was about truth. He started walking away from the center of the arena. Vexa shouted, Where are you going? He stopped, turned his head slightly. To prepare, he said. For what comes next? Vexa's voice trembled. And what comes next? Joran's eyes glowed in the torchlight. For the first time, his voice held strength like thunder. Justice. Then he walked off the battlefield. The gates closed behind him, and the crowd didn't cheer, because deep down, they knew. This was no longer a performance. This was the beginning of a war of truth. The healing room was dark, lit only by blue medical lights on the walls. A single alien medic stood over Joran's body, whispering under her breath. She had treated warriors before, beasts, brutes, killers, but never someone like this. Joran's ribs were cracked, his shoulder dislocated, his leg swollen, but he didn't scream. He didn't even groan. He sat on the steel table, breathing slow, as if pain was a memory, not a feeling. You need rest, the medic said quietly. Joran didn't answer. He looked at the broken spear half beside him, Vexa's golden weapon. He had brought it from the arena like a trophy, but not out of pride. It was a symbol. The fight was only the beginning. In the royal tower above the arena, Princess Vexa sat before her mother, the Empress. She held a cold cloth to her cheek, trying to numb the sting of the scar. But the scar wasn't the real pain. He trained my father, Vexa said again, staring at the floor. The Empress's eyes were unreadable. He is dangerous, the Empress replied. He didn't kill me, Vexa whispered. He should have, her mother said sharply. Because now the crowd sees him as more than a slave. They see a hero. Vexa looked up. Then, what do we do? The Empress stood, her robe trailing behind her like smoke. We crush him, publicly. We break him again. Later that night, a deep horn echoed through the city. A voice followed, loud and cold. By command of the Empress, the human slave Joran will fight 3 champions at sunrise. No mercy, no rules, 1 survivor. The people gasped. A challenge. Like this hadn't been called in decades. It was a death sentence. Morning came too quickly. Joran stepped into the arena once more, his ribs wrapped in cloth, his wounds half healed. But his mind was sharp. He looked up. Thousands had come to watch, not to laugh this time, but to see something rare. Hope. Across from him the gates opened, and 3 beasts entered, not aliens, monsters, each one larger than a human tank, claws, fangs, black scales like armor. These were bred to kill in seconds. The crowd held their breath, but Joran didn't move. The monsters roared and charged together. Joran ducked the first claw, rolled beneath a tail, and drove a metal rod deep into the second beast's side. Istrukyu, scream filled the sky, but a third monster hit him hard. Joran flew across the arena, smashing into the wall. The world spun. He tried to stand, but something in his leg cracked. The crowd screamed. Some shouted for him to stay down, but Joran looked at his hand. It was shaking. Not from fear, from fire. He grabbed a chain from the ground, once meant to hold him, and pulled himself up. The monsters rushed again. Joran didn't step back. He ran, for his chain wrapped around one beast's neck. He used its weight to swing toward another. His broken leg failed, but his arms lifted him. He landed on the third monster's back and drove a sharpened spear piece through its skull. The arena exploded with sound. 1 monster down. Then 2. The third circled, snarling. Joran was breathing hard. Blood ran down his face. He could barely stand. But he raised his hand. The chain swung like a whip. He pulled. The last beast charged and ran right into a broken pillar. The impact cracked its neck. It collapsed like a mountain falling. Silence. Then thunder, not from the sky, from the crowd. They stood, cheered, screamed, not for blood, for the man who should have died, but didn't, for the slave who rose. Up in the royal tower, Vexa stood beside her mother. He won, she said, her voice low. The Empress's jaw tightened. He refuses to break, Vexa whispered. Or maybe he's already free. That night in the city's lowest streets, slaves whispered his name. In the royal courts, nobles debated his future. And in the heart of the people, something had changed. A single human, beaten, chained, bloodied, had done the impossible. And now, the empire trembled. The torchlights inside the royal hall flickered like nervous hearts. Princess Vexa stood in front of the mirror of lineage, a tall black glass that only the royal family could stand before. Every empress before her had looked into it. Every future ruler was tested by what they saw in its surface. Vexa saw herself, but not the version she once knew. Gone was the flawless skin, the perfect posture, the pride. Now a scar split her cheek like a line between past and present, and in her eyes was doubt. Behind her, the Empress stood silent, arms crossed. "He fights again tomorrow," the Empress said coldly. "Unless we stop him." Vexa turned around. "And how will you do that? Kill him in his sleep? Poison his water?" The Empress's voice was sharp. "If needed, yes. No," Vexa said, louder than she meant to. "He didn't kill me when he had the chance. He humiliated me. He scarred me. But he showed honor." The Empress walked forward. "You speak as if you admire him. I think. I understand." "Him," Vexa said. "For the first time I understand why he fights." "Then go end it," the Empress ordered. "Face him again. This time, crush Crush him. The next day, a special challenge was announced. The princess herself would face the human one final time. The winner would decide the fate of the other. No crowd had ever filled the arena faster. This wasn't a fight for blood. This was war between pride and principle. The gates opened. Joran stepped out first. No chains now. Just simple armor, scratched, old, but worn with pride. He looked up. The cheers were different now. Not mockery, not sympathy. Respect. Then Vexa walked out from the opposite gate. Her armor was new, but she wore no crown, no cape. Only the scar across her face marked her as royal. The crowd hushed. Joran looked at her. "You came," he said. "I had to," she replied. They circled slowly. "I know who you were," she said. "My father spoke of a human warrior who never bowed. And now I stand again," Joran replied. "No," she said. "Now, you rise." They fought. Not like before. This was not about rage or revenge. It was skill against skill, history against power, spear clashing with blade, feet sliding, on dust, sweat mixing with blood. Vexa's strikes were faster, cleaner, but Joran's movement had purpose. Midway through the fight, she landed a hit, hard across his shoulder. He grunted and dropped to one knee. She raised her weapon, blade aimed at his neck. The crowd held its breath. Joran looked up at her. "Finish it," he said. She froze. Her hands shook. She remembered her words from before. "You're just a slave." And now, he kneeled before her again. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like shame. She stepped back, dropped her weapon, turned to the crowd. "I lost," she said. The arena exploded in gasps. Vexa faced the Empress's balcony. "This man, this human, is more royal than I will ever be." The Empress stood up in rage. But the people stood louder. They clapped. They shouted Joran's name. And the slaves in the shadows wept silently. Because for the first time, someone had knelt. Not in weakness, but in choice. Vexa knelt before Joran, not as a princess, but as a person. "I mocked you once," she said. "I was blind. But now, I see." Joran slowly helped her to her feet, and for the first time, he smiled. It wasn't a smile of revenge. It was freedom. The sky above the arena was painted gold and violet as the sun set on the Empire. The crowd hadn't left. They stood in silence waiting, not for another fight, but for what came next. At the center of the blood-stained arena floor, Joran stood tall. His chest rose slowly with each breath. His body was bruised. His arm hung slightly from pain, but his eyes were full of something no one could crush. Honor. Vexa stood beside him, her head bowed, not in shame, but in respect. All around them, the alien nobles remained speechless. In the royal tower above, the Empress still sat on her throne. But she no longer looked like a ruler. She looked like a shadow, out of place in the new light. A deep horn echoed once more. A voice, this time not from a soldier but from a royal scholar, rang through the arena. "By decree of the court, Joran of Earth is no longer a slave. He is warrior. He is free." The crowd erupted, not with screams of joy, but with the raw sound of something ancient and rare. Hope. In the days that followed, stories of the fight spread like fire. Across cities and planets, people alien and human spoke the name Joran with awe. Children acted out his battles in the streets. Slaves whispered his name like a prayer, and rulers grew afraid. Because if one human, once broken, once beaten, could rise and bring a princess to her knees, what could many do? Joran didn't stay in the palace. He didn't wear armor or accept golden titles. He walked through the slave quarters with a limp and a gentle smile. He sat with wounded workers and shared food from his plate. He taught them how to fight, how to think, how to believe again. One day, a young alien girl with sharp green eyes asked him, "Are you the strongest man in the galaxy?" He chuckled softly. "No," he said. "I'm just the one who stood up first." Vexa returned to her training ground, not to prepare for war but to unlearn. She asked questions. She sat with former slaves. She watched, and listened, and learned. And slowly, the people began to trust her, because she had done something no ruler before her ever had. She admitted she was wrong. Far beyond the cities, deep in the mountain regions of the Empire, a flag was raised. It was not the royal crest. It was simple. A broken chain, drawn in red. The resistance had been born, and its first message was clear. We remember the man who fought in silence. We remember the human who rose. We are not slaves. We are next. Years passed. Joran became a legend, but he never claimed a throne. He only asked for one thing: let the future be better than the past. In time, statues were built in his name, not in the royal courts, but in the streets where the people could touch them. On the base of each statue, one line was carved. He didn't want revenge. He wanted them to remember who he truly was, and they did, forever.